First of all, it took me 20 years in America to get rid of my indoctrinated mind. I just wanted to come here for freedom, have a better life. Just everybody leave me alone. So 20 years I was busy. But when I woke up, 2008, I noticed something. It's like there's something going on in America I really don't like. How come governments got really bigger, more intrusive, and also they're using some terms, like a communist terms. And especially under, when also Obama become president, and his rhetoric is, we got to fundamentally transform America. To what country? I came here for America, but they want to transform it.
Trigger warnings, safe spaces, microaggressions, unconscious bias, and lived experience. The language of therapy is now used widely and indiscriminately. We live in a time where stoicism and rationality are seen as antiquated, harmful even. Instead, we are encouraged to normalise eccentricities and perversions while endlessly focusing on our needs, our emotions, self-care, and our inner child. And yet, more and more of us are looking out at our culture and society and feel like we are observing a psychiatric ward. Male rapists in women's prisons, racial segregation in schools, the censorship of books, and the rewriting of history. The world's gone mad, many of us cry.
Welcome to Armor of Truth Live, number 333. We've got more from that clip coming up soon. But I want to talk to you about anxiety for a moment. People around the world report sensing something impending. Everywhere there's a sense of nervous anticipation about something that's about to happen. Every day there's a new reason to be upset, anxious, or angry. People from India to Africa, from Cambodia to Peru, from Australia to Iceland, to the United States, to Russia, throughout Europe, and every place in between are edgy, anxious, fearful, worried, and tired of being that way. Political and cultural spectrums have shifted, and alliances have shifted. The world is in flux, and we all know it. We can feel it. The markers of reality we once knew are almost completely gone. We're all afloat, gritting our teeth. We can't feel the bottom, so there's nowhere to place an anchor. And there's no dock in sight. Ultimately, the people of the world are all at once aloft, blowing in the currents of history. We're hovering between two ages, caught up in this uncomfortable transition. Some kind of reset is upon us. Even truth and the methods that we use to find it are all hazy now. Ideology has become the measure of value in our interactions with others. The news and events are coming at us so fast and so many that it's impossible to keep up. Big tech is taking over. And at the same time, suspicion of big tech is at an all-time high, as it is with government, elections, and large corporations in general, all for different reasons. Wars and rumors of wars, as more people than ever seem to be over the U.S. government's forever wars in the Middle East and beyond. We even see Democrats today beginning to question their ideas and policies in the infamous blue cities like San Fran, Chicago, New York. They're even losing patience with lefty slumlord Gavin Newsom. Times are strange. One such oddity I think that's interesting, that's boomed since at least 9/11 and the advent of the internet, is the daily prophecy update. Internet prophets, grifters, are a thing now. The anxiety that the people of the world are collectively feeling and expressing can be defined, and it's really not so esoteric. It's demoralization. What's the cause? Everybody sees it, but who can actually define it? Because in order to deal with it, move beyond it, we need to define it. Riding this wave of mostly curated information that's meant to destabilize you, because destabilization is the point. Once the people have been sufficiently demoralized, meaning that they've been compelled to reject God or any sort of transcendent foundation or starting point for reality, then the people are compelled to believe that there'll be a utopian golden age of science and rationalism and world peace. Look around you. The world has rejected God and objective reality. Is it better? Once the people have been demoralized, the next step is destabilization. In this sense, destabilization looks like deconstruction of all traditional structures that have held society together, including knowledge. Marxism is an anti-reality movement where knowledge, ideas, and imagination have no reality of their own. Therefore, with no immovable foundation or principles, anything goes, and everything is permitted. And if you say no, you're the racist. You're the oppressive bigot. Science, rather than a method for acquiring knowledge and advancing the standard of living for everyone, becomes a weapon wielded for social and political power. Climate alarmism, population control, viruses, and immigration become tools for power. Once we've been demoralized and destabilized and infected with this doctrine of self-loathing, that is Marxism and critical theory, then we lose the ability to think clearly. The virtues of love and respect are squelched by an undefinable sense of anxiety that leads to self-destructive hypervigilance. Inevitably, some of us become utterly obsessed with our anxieties, and every social structure and every person becomes a potential threat. Every news story becomes a potential threat. We see enemies everywhere. This is the crisis stage, when the new order begins to exert itself and actually take control of institutions and structures. Right now, it seems that we're living between two ages, and everyone is confused and anxious and ready for the damn thing to burst already. Something happened. Anything. Drifting. Waiting for something to happen. We want to help you understand a little bit about what that is, why that's happening, and why people feel like that. Before I describe the Cloward Piven strategy, let's welcome to the show the lovely Summer.
It's wonderful to be here.
There she is, folks.
Hello, everyone.
She's back. Okay. Let me go ahead and let me describe this Cloward Piven strategy, because that's going to set us up nicely. Summer's got a great presentation for you tonight about why are we anxious? What's actually at work? What's actually causing all this? In 1966, sociologists Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven produced an article that explained a certain method, a method for forcing change on a political system, an economy, a nation, and in fact, it could work to shift the whole world toward a desired outcome. Essentially, the method involves destabilizing nations by overwhelming government structures. One such strategy was to combat poverty by dramatically increasing the number of welfare recipients, overwhelming the system with applications to create a financial and administrative crisis that would create the circumstances for tearing down the existing system and implementing radical change to equity and wealth redistribution. The working class would be inflamed by the perceived injustices and motivated to action by promises that will never come to fruition. This strategy is built on several key assumptions, and if it sounds similar or familiar to you, there's a good reason for that. This is the dialectical process. It assumes systemic inequality. It assumes that the system is broken and discriminatory. It assumes that crisis is really a catalyst. It assumes that crisis is an effective method for positive outcome. It assumes that if you create the crisis, that will create political mobilization, that people will demand radical change. And it also assumes that the government response will be to reorganize. And that requires to have radical operatives in government for that to work. From the start, this method is cynical and morally repugnant. It's a Machiavellian strategy based on false promises, manipulation, and intentional chaos and destruction. Proverbs 6:16-19 says, "The Lord hates a heart that devises wicked plans and feet that make haste to run to evil." So the most obvious problem with this sort of sick strategy is that it always harms the very ones it claims to be helping. What happens to the poor while the system is in crisis? What guarantees do the poor have? And I don't mean just the poor, I mean working classes, the middle class in this case. What happens during the transition, during the Great Reset? Will their needs be met? What about once the system is ultimately destroyed? What's going to replace it? Who actually benefits? These awful ideas always lead to more suffering and hardship for the masses, and they never bring the utopia they promise. The ends do not justify the means, if the means involve creating more hardship and putting even more pressure on those already in need. History has shown us time and time and time again that these insane strategies do not result in new reformed, gloriously balanced systems. Governments always react to such fiscal crises with more austerity measures, not less, and less social welfare, not more, and a lower standard of living, not higher. Socialists, aka communists, aka Marxists, they're all the same thing. They never deliver on their promises because they can't. Their ideas are based on false premises, pipe dreams, and outright lies. Worse. They always make poverty worse rather than alleviating it. Almost like that was the plan all along. The pursuit of justice should be aligned with peace and order, not chaos. So this Cloward-Piven strategy, it's also the dialectical process of Marxism. And it may claim to care about the poor and the disenfranchised, but their methods have always only enriched the party and the few who control it, and are morally and ethically questionable, practically dubious, and inevitably causes collateral damage and destroys lives. Okay, so now we want to. This is a comment from it was just a comment on social media somewhere, and it was about a year ago. This person says, "I'm 57 years old. Not only does it feel like something wicked this way comes, but there's also this feeling that the whole world is holding its breath, almost as though we're all waiting for some catalyst or sign or event that puts an end to this feeling of being put on hold, this vague, unexplained unease that we feel, something terrible lurking just out of our field of vision, but we all feel it closing in. I cannot count the number of people who've told me they wish that whatever's going to happen would just get on with it, that this waiting for the thing in the darkness is unbearable." I thought this meme would be useful. It kind of has to do with the fourth turning, or that theory. When we go through hard times, it creates strong men, and then strong men create good times, and then good times create weak men, and then weak men create more hard times, and thus the circle continues. Speaking of the Cloward-Piven strategy, the dialectical process of change, let's listen to this piece here. Summer, what's this lady's name again? This is the co-president of the Club of Rome. And I've got her. All right, we'll get her name for you in a second. But just listen to. It's not really important what her name is here. Let's listen to this message. You can hear these tactics. You can hear these tactics at work.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is not difficult. The needed policies to put Europe further on the path towards a more sustainable and inclusive society and economy have their anchors in the EU's own history, traditions, initiatives, and legislation. Notably, these anchors are found in the Treaty on the European Union, the European Commission's own strategic dashboards, and the European Green Deal. It shows that by keeping the overarching vision for an economic model that underpins the European Green and Social Deal and delivers greater prosperity, the European institutions can and should set the tone for a future policy. Our goal now is to bring the member states and citizens on this journey. But before I talk more about growth, I want to say a few words about democracy in the same way that President Metsola indicated how important Europe's democracy is. It is now very obvious that the idea of growth and democracy are inextricably linked. The discussion today comes 1 year ahead of big elections in major democracies, including the United States, the UK, and of course the European Union. In these elections, every party from left to right will talk about economic growth. They will all have their solutions to drive growth. The media will challenge them on whether these solutions will actually foster growth. But the growth narrative is never changed. We are all here to change that. We are all here to show that the emperor or the empress has no clothes.
Okay. She's talking about here the obsession with growth, she says.
Obsession with economic growth is clearly failing the majority of people. Let's be clear, democracies are under threat.
Is that true? I ask you, Summer, is that true what she says? Is it true that that capitalism is failing?
Because they're causing it to do so.
It's only happening because that's exactly what they're doing to it. Let's listen to the last couple comments here are very interesting too, because you'll hear some language that you'll recognize immediately.
Economies in New Zealand, Iceland, Wales, Scotland, and Finland. And in recent weeks, the Irish President, Michael Higgins, challenged the country's obsession with growth. And we also see Canada and Costa Rica and so many other countries that are saying enough is enough. A growth economy and extractive economy is not servicing.
So what is the counter to a growth economy?
Degrowth.
What is degrowth? Degrowth is let's make it very clear. When they talk about growth, they're talking about population. They're not really talking about economy. They're talking about bringing the population down. Let me bring this last little point here because I thought it's very cute.
My country, my people, this planet, our home. Gentlemen, this is a message to politicians campaigning on an economic growth platform. People don't want economic growth. They want economic security. They want ecological stability. They want government investment in their future. And
remember, the people who offer you security. Remember what security means. Prisoners are some of the most secure people in the world. They have all their needs met every day, all day.
Economic and financial systems that foster their well-being. If we need growth, it is a growth in social cohesion to empower democratic governments to act. That is the priority. The opportunity for the EU is huge. Generation, the EU could achieve energy security, food security, and economic security. How do we achieve it? We need leadership from the EU to shift the economic system from one that is grounded in power and profit and patriarchy to one that is anchored in people, planet, and prosperity.
Triple bottom line.
There it is.
People, planet, profit.
There's the old, she says prosperity, they mean profit, for sure. For sure. Okay, so as we start out today, we've already started, haven't we? Let me, where did my... completely lost our video. There it is. Play one more clip here before Summer gets going. This clip will be about. No, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait till we get to the Frankfurt School. So let's go ahead and get started with with what you have for us. All right.
Okay. All right. So you can see there's a term here, wokist. Wokist is a combo of woke and Marxist, and it just sort of happened on the couch one evening. I was thinking these wokists, and I think it really works because obviously it's one and the same. So we wanted to drive that point home for you guys, and we've got a presentation for you tonight, and very much looking forward to it. Definitely put a lot of work into it. And coming back to what we spoke about on the last show and society's vulnerabilities, what we're going to be thinking about is some terms: negative thinking, repression and trauma, repressive tolerance and liberating tolerance, and how with this woke mob mentality, they use a different dictionary. They have the same vocabulary, but they use a different dictionary. And we're all tossing around in this storm. We're in a tornado, we're in the waves, and we're crashing around. And so we felt that this was a really good message, hopefully for you guys, that would be very reassuring to just sort of help you to take yourself out of that storm and realize on another level just what's happening. So we want to give you that 80,000 foot view. So we want to start by saying this quote from Mickey Willis: "We know how to navigate military war, but when it's a psychological war, when it's invisible and it's happening in such a way that even really wise, intelligent people can't perceive, that's the stuff that gets to even the most protected nation."
Yeah, this Mickey Willis. He's a filmmaker. We got here's another clip of him where he's explaining how he when he went on to the Bernie Sanders campaign tour back in 2016, and he was a lefty. He was liberal,
all in at that point,
and he learned what was really going on.
And he was a filmmaker, so he went on tour with them. Here, let's take a listen.
Sorry about that.
Disrupt
from California to Philadelphia.
all the pre-existing
and in that time
approaches.
is when
Providing a perfect...
Sorry. He's got a huge problem here. There we go.
the Great Awakening happened, political awakening in Philadelphia. And in that time is when the Great Awakening happened, political
That's
awakening.
That's when he went out with Bernie Sanders.
Because I started seeing these young people that were wearing Che Guevara shirts and Lenin shirts, and Mao Zedong hats and stickers, and communist sickle and hammers on their laptops and their water bottles. And I asked one kid, I said, are you trying to be edgy? What is that about on your laptop there? And then, they kind of pulled me behind the curtain and they said, well, democratic socialism, we're all democratic socialists, and what we really want is communism. And I laughed. I thought, you're joking, right? And he said, no. But I can tell by the way you're reacting that you think it's the communism that, no, because it's a different kind of communism, and it's one that's never been attempted, and it's benevolent, and as I sort of drill in, how does it work? What is good about it? Why is it different? It basically led to the state owning and controlling everything. We're gonna redistribute the wealth. Okay, where does that money go to, and then how does it get redistributed? Through the government. I said, so you're giving the government more and more of your tax money, more and more power. Do you understand this is not a new communism? This is what has always happened. I know enough about that to know that, at least. And so it was a shocker for me. Long story short, I came off the Bernie tour brokenhearted, and it was my political awakening. I wanted nothing to do with politics ever again. And that's when I started to do my research and study what was really going on with this thing called democratic socialism. And all roads trace back to China and influence from other Soviet Marxist ideologies that have already been attempted and been atrocious.
And that's exactly what Kamala Harris is
adhering to.
There's a good, here it is. There's a James Lindsay tweet from yesterday, I guess it is there. It's funny, she doesn't seem to make sense, but it's always pitch perfect communism, right?
That's what she knows. Her father was one.
Yeah. Okay, so let's where's my, there it is. Go ahead and continue with the next piece there.
All right, so right here, we just want to call to your attention bubble wrap. So you notice that in that last clip when Mickey Willis was speaking about his awakening, all right? So I want to get you guys to think about this idea of the wokest and the woke Marxist. And when we think of the woke are people who are supposedly awake to see what the oppressor is doing, right? The ways that they're being oppressed, the system that they have to take down. So they're woke. But we also have this other movement that very much talks about awakening, and it's in the Christian truther realm. It's in the Christless conservative realm. It's in the Max Egan, David Icke, New Age movement. All right, so just think about also how if you're in these different movements, you're actually both awake, right? One is woke, one is awake. And the other thing about it is in the cocoon of algorithms and AI, you're constantly in this echo chamber that reinforces this message, whether you're coming at it from the more liberal side or the more conservative side. Okay, so awake is woke, and you're in your bubble wrap. You're insulated. You're being told all of these different messages that reinforce your worldview. And what we're going to say to you is waking up is not salvation. Okay, we know that. We've talked about that before in the past. I just wanted to pop that up for those of you guys who have been with us for a while. But we're not going to go there today. But, suffice it to say, waking up is not salvation.
I'll jump in there. And just to give a little more context on that, when, the truth movement, I know we talk about this quite a bit, but the point, what we're trying to say here is that there's an idea out there from the truth movement from back when it really got its traction, which was YouTube came online about 2007, really in earnest. Somewhere, leading up to 2012 with the big shift, we were talking at the top of the show about when did this all change? Was it 9/11? Was it 2012 Mayan calendar? Or was it 2020?
Was it Behold a Pale Horse?
Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah.
Was it 2020? Was it the pandemic? What scamdemic? When did it change? Well, it's not exactly clear, and it's not really important that we point that out. But with the advent of the internet and social media and
the
blogging,
tool of social media,
the blogging and the online truth movement, it existed before that, but it was very fringe. But then it grew in strength and numbers when the internet came around.
Right.
And so the idea was, we're going to liberate ourselves with this knowledge. We're going to learn about we're going to expose the darkness, and that's going to make us wiser, and we're going to overcome. We're going to overcome. And in fact, in learning about all these things came the libertarian movement. And then actually, after that came the anarchist movement out of the truth movement. And this means that basically they want to tear down all of the structures. So you can see that's the same idea. Tear down, the government is evil. It can't be trusted at all, ever.
right?
So we have to tear it down.
So
Where did they get that idea? This thing has been implanted in us. Marxism, the idea of tearing down the structures, is something that's really been implanted in us as a process of progressivism.
Well, and what we're going to say here is liberating tolerance. So if you know about the character Herbert Marcuse, he co-opted Freud's concept of repression. So we've told you about Brockchism and how they've used psychology as a weapon of the ruling class. And here's one of those facets. This is where Freud's concepts got infiltrated by Marxism. Herbert Marcuse popularized this. And so this is the idea of playing on people's traumas in order to strike chords, very real chords within people, things that really happen in true life, but then manipulate the system. So when you think about liberating tolerance, the very definition, again, when we think about vocabulary being different, how the vocabulary is different between us and them, as it were. So Marcuse's reinterpretation of repression leads to a paradoxical view of tolerance. In his 1965 essay, Repressive Tolerance, Marcuse argues that tolerance in modern society serves to maintain the status quo, following traditional values to persist and remain unchallenged. To counter this, Marcuse advocates for liberating tolerance, which involves actively opposing ideas and values that perpetuate societal repression, particularly those that align with traditional and Christian values. So that's where the light bulb should be coming on.
We've got there's a good clip to help back that up.
Perfect.
To learn a little bit more about Marcuse, who he is, where he comes from, and a little bit more about this theory. This comes from, what's the name of their channel again? Where Amy Gallagher is.
Oh, it's something New Culture Forum, I believe it's called.
Forum, and the show is called Heresies. Right?
Yeah.
So let's check this out.
Originating in the 1930s, the Frankfurt School were a group of radical far-left academics who sought to merge Freud's psychoanalytic theory with Marxism. This merger would become to be known as critical theory, and it would seek to dismantle and upturn prevailing power structures as defined from a purely communist perspective. And so, psychoanalysis and psychological concepts and terms more broadly became co-opted by a narrow and extreme political agenda. The most influential among the critical theorists was Herbert Marcuse. Building on Freud's emphasis on repression, Marcuse proposed that a tolerant liberal society should be thought as exhibiting a form of societal repression, a notion he termed repressive tolerance. A truly liberated and unrepressed society could only be realized through communism. And to achieve this would require an intolerance and even violence towards anyone who opposed communism. Alongside this, anxiety and alienation signalled being in contact with the reality of your own oppression, whereas happiness, belonging and positivity were a sign that you had developed false consciousness and internalized your own oppression. And what was the cure for your false consciousness? To awaken a critical consciousness, to become woke, to become just as resentful and cynical as the critical theorists themselves. So, real tolerance is being intolerant, negative thinking is positive, and happiness is oppression. If this all sounds insane, it's because it is.
So that's interesting, isn't it? That the idea is you become just as cynical and angry as, the Marxist, as the critical theorist, or once that's implanted in you and it's embedded in us, we've all been affected by it, just like we've all been affected by expressive individualism.
Right. So building on what you've just seen, here's this slide again that says awakening, in a sense, is woke. It is liberating tolerance. It is a wokeist Marxist concept. So it serves to deconstruct reality, undermine social cohesion, attack reality itself so that they can own the new reality that they're bringing in. Okay?
Yeah.
So here's a slide of Herbert Marcuse. This is one of his most famous works right here, coming out of the Frankfurt School. And again, his concept of negative thinking as well as it pertains to Freud's work.
Okay, let's talk through that idea of negative thinking. Go ahead with your...
Okay.
I just want to, because this is one, it took me a little while to grab on to. We've got the idea of liberating tolerance. Mm-hmm. And
repressive
we've got
tolerance.
And the idea of negative thinking. And then we've got Jacques Derrida's idea of deconstruction.
Right.
These are all similar, but Marcuse's two ideas are liberating tolerance and what's the other one I just forgot? Negative thinking. Let's.
Yes. So analysis of Herbert Marcuse's comment on dialectical thought and negative thinking would say that Herbert Marcuse's concept of negative thinking emphasizes the importance of critical dialectical analysis in understanding and transforming reality. So in layman's terms, it means that you need to implement the skill of critical thinking and dissecting, in other words, to bring about the change that you want, the systemic change that you want. And I know that this is going to be ringing bells for people. So negative thinking drives dialectical thought by continuously challenging existing realities, revealing their internal contradictions and inadequacies. This process is crucial for any meaningful critique and change, as it uncovers the dynamic and contradictory nature of reality, pointing towards possibilities for transformation and, they would say, improvement.
This is where the idea of when the natural and human sciences took on a messianic meaning. They became like the savior. And this is also where the social gospel starts to take hold in America. It's where the idea where we have to realize this new order. We have to tear it all down and create a new one, or as the anarchist movement would say, we have to just get rid of all our rulers. But essentially, it's all gunning for the same thing, to tear it all down.
Right.
Now this is patently anti-Christian. It's well, and
satanic.
In one sense, it's an antichrist idea. So this is why we want to make sure that while we're going to be very clearly criticizing Marxist thinking,
right, with
some very good points, especially from Lily Tang Williams coming up in just a little bit, who lived through Mao's Great Leap Forward, it was terrible. We'll play that later on, but. Also, we want to help you understand that this has affected all of us. And so when we talk about being awake or waking up and how we can't trust it all, we just have to withdraw from it all or tear it all down. And we're thinking like Marxists when we do that.
Right. So to sort of just wrap that to talk about negative thinking again, I've got a slide up here. So again, we're thinking about woke versus awake, or woke and awake being wokesist. It's a false light movement. It's charging you up to implement the skill set of negative thinking. So, some of these concepts would be to free you from the patriarchy if you were going through the revolution, the women's revolution and stuff like this, and the hippie times or whatnot. Free your mind, give you gnosis, the knowledge of good and evil. It appeals to that. We all have this intrinsic desire to know. And I'm putting at the bottom there, unburdened by what has been, because what we're going to show you throughout this presentation tonight is how Kamala Harris is very much a Marxist. She is, as much as she tries to say that she's not, she truly is. And unburdened by what has been is all about shattering the oppressor class, right? So it's about toppling the old world systems to supposedly bring in the promise of the new. And so when we think about, just to go back on negative thinking, so in dialectical thought, negative thinking refers to the process of critique and contradiction. It involves questioning and challenging existing conditions and norms, revealing their contradictions and inadequacies. And originating from Hegelian philosophy, dialectical thought is a method of analysis that understands reality as dynamic and contradictory. It progresses through the resolution of contradictions, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Yeah, that's interesting. The false light, this idea is, it's really important because as we look back over America's history, we come through the the two great awakenings, which were positive for the church, but running alongside of them were the false awakenings as well, where we got the idea of the altar call, and that's the origin of the NAR and the word faith, the megachurch movement. And so there was, let's see, I had a good...
Yeah, out of that book about progressivism.
Yeah, it's what it explains here is really interesting, because at one point the World Council of Churches played an important role in bringing on this false light idea that there would be a global order. In fact, one of the movements, one of the men, if I can find his name, I'll bring it up here, but actually believed that we should have a global totalitarian movement, until he was shown what that actually meant, and he repented of that. And as I said earlier, this idea of the daily prophecy update, the explosive mixture of Bible prophecy and political self-determination. So this idea of man's virtue coupled with a belief in science gave rise to the idea of progressivism. Science had finally provided man with the appropriate means to empower him to perfect his own nature and establish the perfect society on earth. To build the perfect society, does that ring any bells, right? And that's the idea of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment thinking, liberty or freedom to do what thou wilt. No boundaries, which is a little different from the idea of liberty and the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution. All right, continue on.
Yeah, so do you want to play another clip from Amy Gallagher?
I've got this next clip here. Let's see. Here we go.
The critical theorists began to notice a problem preventing their communist utopia. Living conditions had improved so dramatically for the working classes, they lacked a desire for full-scale revolution. In response to this, a shift began to happen. Oppression in economic terms began to be replaced by oppression in relation to identity, namely gender, sexuality, and race.
So, in short, what we see there is we've got originally Marxism was
Haves, haves nots.
Right. The Soviet Union model of communism and Marxism was economic Marxism. Well, it was going to take over the world, because this is how you should, this is how we're going. This Marxist idea of economy, that's gonna save the world. It's gonna take over the world, and it's good. It's benevolent. Well, what happened was, and it's a response to capitalism. That's one of its foundational principles, is that capitalism is evil and oppressive. Well, what happened was, as you saw there, is capitalism, it turns out, people were too happy. People were just too well off to want to listen to Marxism anymore. So they moved it away from about economy, and now it's about identity.
Identity politics,
and
yeah.
that's exactly, Marcuse and Mao Zedong were contemporaries. And I don't know who influenced who or how, but they had very similar ideas about how to use identity as a way, as a dialectical process to move forward this change. And that's what was, I thought it was just really important to understand that point, is because they had to shift the idea away from what they called vulgar Marxism to this new progressive form of Marxism that would be about gender and race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they want to undermine social cohesion and attack reality itself by doing this, by creating these divides between people, and to control the masses by doing this.
Yeah, and so one of the, some of the big, just to give you an example, some of the big points of how do you do identity Marxism? You've seen a lot of it with the gay rights and the transgender movement, but you see it also in lawfare. The civil rights movement, one of the biggest movements. I mean, it set up this new system where lawfare would be the way forward. That would be the way to handle, to shut down your political opponents. Civil rights movement, for all we can argue for what its good outcomes were, but race hustlers moved in to inflame black rage and to keep them down, to keep the money coming. This already achieved equality under the law must be kept at a perceived generational distance away, so there's always something to agitate for, something to get funding for. And that's the trick. That's the double bind. They make you promises that are always just a bit away. What's interesting is Marx made the same criticism of Christianity, saying that it's the opiate of the masses because the reward is always in the distance. It's always coming. Well, that's a very different idea than what they're doing. They're working through manipulation. The scriptures are foundational truth. Marxism is manipulation. It's
an alternate gospel.
Exactly. Yeah, it most definitely is. It's the idea of manipulation to force change for an outcome that we believe is just, but it never happens. It never comes to fruition.
Right. So as we move on to the next slide here, what we've got here is what can be unburdened by what has been. So this idea of we don't want to be burdened by all these different social injustices that have happened in the past, and we want to tear down the old world and bring in the new system that they're promising everybody is going to be so much better, and it's going to bring about equity, which we know that equity is problematic because what equity really means is serf class, neo-serf class for everybody. But they would have you believe that there's going to be this, great equalizer where everybody will have the same opportunities, and that's just not true. That's not how it ever works out in the end, and obviously time will tell if it comes to that point, Lord forbid. But it's very ironic because they're saying that they want to get rid of that old system so that they can bring about this equity. But in fact, this is going to be the bit so in other words, let's get rid of imperialism. Let's get rid of the colonizers, right? But they're, in the meantime, with the CBDC and all of this, they're actually ushering in the most colonizer method ever known to the planet with the technology. So again, I just wanted to reinforce this idea that Maoist, Marxist, communist tactics, they use the same vocabulary, but they have a different dictionary. And hopefully you're going to open up and see some of these terms and how it's working actively right now.
Our next clip is going to go into Frantz Fanon.
Okay.
The idea of decolonization.
Perfect. That sets us up perfectly.
All right, then. Let's do that.
In the 1950s, the French-Algerian psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Frantz Fanon joined the Algerian National Liberation Front. In his writings, Fanon praised the Nazis for resolving Germany's border issues by force, and he urged a similar violent revolution in Algeria to achieve the same cultural purification.
Just to make it clear, this is one of the heroes of the kids you see marching in the streets and spray painting Washington D.C.
Post-colonial studies.
Yeah, this is one of their big heroes right here, and you'll hear in just a moment. He believed that Hitler had it right. Listen for that.
During this time, Fanon was making his own contributions to critical theory, specifically on the subject of race, paving the way for the decolonization movement. In keeping with the Marxist separation of people into either oppressors or oppressed, Fanon saw people not as individuals, but as colonizers or colonized. Fanon took the Nazi prejudices applied to Jews, that they were all rich, all powerful, and to blame for all the evil in the world, and he applied this to white Europeans.
The denial that it's that it's a good thing to treat people as individuals, and instead we see people as ciphers or proxies of a collective identity based on race, and that's really harmful. It's harmful because it's dehumanizing.
For Fanon, revolutionary murder is a necessity. Political violence is presented as being therapeutic, and the mass killing of Europeans a kind of psychiatric treatment. And what exactly did so-called decolonization look like for Fanon? A complete destruction of political and economic systems brought about through violent genocide. In Fanon's words, decolonization is quite simply the replacing of a certain species of men by another species of men.
It's racism. So when you hear this group pointing orange man bad, orange man racist, orange man Hitler, you just understand their heroes are racists. are genocidal. This
And
is the truth.
They are making calls to violence.
And I hope that, yeah, they are. And even Kamala Harris is making calls for violence.
Yeah.
But they're veiled. So the reason we wanted to share this with you is so that when you hear this political rhetoric, you see all this, you understand exactly where Kamala Harris is coming from. This is I think she's an empty vessel. I think she just allows whatever movement's going to hold her up and prop her up. She'll just take on, their ideology, whatever it takes to stay in power. But that's what she's supporting. That's what she's promoting right now, which is racism and genocide. Remember, the number one tactic from these people is to call you what they don't want to be called.
Right. And I just wanted to put up on the screen here, the goal is to make the nation states, particularly right now the target is the Western countries, make nation states obsolete, destroy and cancel Christian Western culture and heritage in the name of equity and liberating tolerance with negative thinking.
So that would be whiteness. So there comes the privilege. You have to destroy all of that. Here's another short clip that'll get into that.
They're conflating the processes of knowledge accumulation with the processes of imperialism and colonialism in the past. And that's the really fatal flaw. That's why if you accept that, then what you are accepting that knowledge and ideas and imagination have no reality of their own, which is why I would call it an anti-realist position regarding knowledge and culture, because they're conflating it with political and historical processes. And I think we need to observe that distinction to allow us the freedom to engage and critique. I also think they're wrong historically. The idea that science or mathematics or philosophy, questions about existence, questions about nationhood, have all been entirely white Europeans, is patently untrue. You only have to look at the nationalist leaders in Africa, the writings of Tagore in India, people in Latin America to see that. And so, to sort of say that they're white or Western is, to me, to give up far too much, far too easily to quite a kind of limited, quite racist argument, really.
It is. It's a racist argument. And so that's the first sign. They call you what they don't want to be called.
Right. And to make a point about moral relativism and cultural fragmentation, Marcuse's reinterpretation fosters a culture of moral relativism, where traditional values are discarded in favor of individual expression and autonomy. So you guys, that should ring some bells right there. This undermines the objective moral order provided by Christian teachings, leading to cultural fragmentation and societal instability. The intolerance towards traditional values creates a divide between those who adhere to these values and those who view them as oppressive, exacerbating societal polarization. So the conclusion in this is that Herbert Marcuse's co-opting of Freud's concept of repression through a Marxist lens redefines tolerance as intolerance towards traditional values. This shift fosters moral relativism, undermining societal cohesion and Christian moral foundations. So as Christians, the Christian cultural apologists must address this reinterpretation and advocate for a return to biblical truth and objective morality in a society increasingly fragmented by relativistic ideologies.
One of the big problems with moral relativism that sadly these kids in the streets don't quite get yet is that if there is no foundational truth, if it's all relative, well, then that means that those who ascend to power will ascend to power through violence, through deception, manipulation, and or violence. And so when they finally come for them, they'll have no argument. And that's the idea. That's what we learn from history, is that when nations would be, or people groups, city-states would be attacked and conquered, it might take It might take a while. They would send in spies, or they would send people in, and they would get people on the inside to work with them, make them promises about, once we take this over, we'll give you this job and that job. But when they actually did conquer the city-state or the nation, the first people to be lined up and killed were those people that were traitors to their nation, because they can't be trusted, because they have no morals. They're empty vessels. They don't have any standards or substantive principles.
Right, and to be fruitful, did you have another clip that you wanted to play before I move to the next slide?
Yeah, this would be this is about defining reality. Yeah, this is
all right. Let's hit
a good point here. This is 2 minutes.
Of Marxism and psychoanalysis marked a change of course with regards to the purpose and use of psychotherapy. The original focus of examining the individual's inner life was now making way for a psychology that was focused on telling people to change the world rather than change anything about themselves.
But how exactly is reality being defined? It seems there is an increasingly narrow concept of reality, which is less about what is objectively true and is more concerned with diagnosing those who have dissenting views. There is a historical precedent for this. In the Soviet Union, those who disagreed with the regime were incarcerated in psychiatric facilities. There is a growing concern in the way psychology is being used to push a political agenda, wield power, and pathologize disagreement.
It's a very, very strange moment in time that we have now, where the idea of, that kind of pursuit of truthful knowledge is seen as dangerous because it can unsettle truths that people in power have used and have needed to maintain their position. But today it's seen as psychologically damaging. The very idea of questioning is seen as somehow damaging the person holding that belief.
I guess it's interesting, isn't it, to think from a psychological perspective as to why so many people are drawn to woke ideology. I often see that a lot of these activists seem to be very unhappy and in a lot of pain. And it seems as though woke ideology gives them an outlet for their anger and their resentment. Woke ideology or critical social justice, it doesn't bring about healing. It keeps you in that state of anger or upset.
It isn't a healing practice. It's a political practice.
That's huge.
Yes.
That's such a big point, because that works both ways. We're trying to loosely warn ourselves and to warn all of you, because we are part of that movement, that it's known as a truth movement. We're in that, right? We're in it, like it or not.
Yeah.
So we want to be real careful that we don't find ourselves in that same situation, because this is not about healing. Tearing down the structures and calling it all false, there's no healing to be found in that.
Yeah, well, and certainly we know that there's a lot of plants, a lot of ops, right, psychological operations that are active because they are, I'm going to move to this next slide, active in this way. We just wanted to call awareness to this, because with this liberating moment that they're trying to say that you're going to have if you get on board with this line of thinking, you can think about how Marxism is active in the false light movements also. So they might have a different, whoever, like I said, the woke movement is saying that they're awake to seeing who the oppressor are, but also more on the conservative side, they would say that you're, awake. People are waking up. This idea of woke and being awake, they might have a different perpetrator on the other end of the stick, so to speak, but we have to think about these things critically, because we know that they are moving us forward and they are hurting us forward toward the synthesis, right? So we think about the truth movement is infected with critical theory, which is Marxism. The truth movement is a decolonizing movement if we're not careful. The truth movement is an exercise in critical theory. You can feel it. There is an anxiety and an anger that's seen in the movement. We've all felt it. No one is immune from it. Problem, reaction, solution, outcome is global totalitarianism and the erasure of the nation states. So think about when you feed and fuel all this suspicion and what's true and what's not true, and we can't trust this and we can't trust that, and it's all fake and it's a simulation and this and that. Beware. By participating in these narratives, you are helping to destroy Western heritage so that the Great Reset becomes our new shared reality. So I wanted everybody to have a very sober, we wanted to have everybody to have a sober understanding of what you're participating in and to choose your battles wisely. And are they Christ-centered? Are they for the gospel? Are they for true truth? Or are they going to be there to just tear down the old system? Because make no mistake, our way of life is under attack right now throughout the world.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's exactly right. I think that, so our message here is really, it's double-pronged. We want to make sure that we're we have to examine ourselves.
Examine our own hearts, yeah.
So that's what we said in the last show, that really the first step to discerning reality is to examine our own hearts, to see that our foundation is firm, that we're not planted in sand, we're planted on the rock, which is obedience to Christ. So now the other part of that, the other prong, I almost forgot, was to give you the tools to refute Marxism. But we can't go out and refute Marxism if over here in our private lives we're involved in really the same kind of thinking and tactics. We have to be not only Christ-centered, but Christ for all of our lives, in all areas of our lives.
That's right. And so just to circle the wagons again in learning the vocabulary, right, of the enemy that we're up against right now. Woke is wake. Think about it also in terms of a false light. Think about what we've talked to you about negative thinking. One of their tactics is silence is violence. Okay, so to not say anything, to not be involved in the negative thinking critique as a skill set, to come against the oppressor, to come against colonialism, to come against anything that's perceived to be imperialism. They can do anything. In their mind, the ends justifies the means. It's very Machiavellian, and they are not going back. Kamala Harris has said, we are going to be unburdened by what has been. We are not going back. You've got Kamala's campaign that was wildly popular or supposedly wildly popular on TikTok, saying Kamala is brat, which is opposed to the Christian good girl, right? So that whole persona that they're propping up is that she's a bad girl. And, they're going to...
And that's cool now, right?
Yeah. And they're going to create this hype and the hyperreal and create just enough, just so much momentum in the hyperreal about her that it gets people to think, yeah, well, I guess maybe she could win. So yeah, we're in this crazy battle for your mind, and it's really wild. It's really wild times, guys. I just wanted to put this back up here again about Herbert Marcuse. Liberating tolerance then would mean intolerance against movements from the right. So that's people from the conservative traditional side, and tolerance of movements from the left. So this is decades ago. So this has been a long time coming. And we just wanted to recommend as well somebody that's doing a lot of great work, James Lindsay, Lisa Logan, Beneath Sheep's Clothing. I think it's supposed to drop on August 9th, so be sure to check that out. They're going to be talking about communism as well.
Yeah, definitely. Keep an eye out for that one. And there's Kamala's campaign slogan, "We're not going back." Right? Destroy all the structures. We're going to make something new.
Yeah, because they're like kids, and they want to just crash everything and break everything so that we have to go forward.
That's true. Okay, now for the next segment, we have one of the greatest clips we've ever found. This is Lily Tang Williams. Let me
so powerful.
Yeah, let me get her Twitter up here. Did we not? I think we have that in our bookmarks.
We do. Yeah.
The 333.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lily Tang Williams. She grew up in Maoist China.
It's toward the bottom there.
Yeah, there's some of the messaging there from Kamala. Also, what does Marxism look like?
That's what Marxism
looks like. It looks like at the Olympics, it looks like men beating the hell out of women. That's Marxism, because you can't. You maybe picked up on the contradiction, right? It's a critical theory, and you have to be critical of all of the structures, but you can't be critical of things like this, because this is progress. Conflict is progress. Of course, I'm not finding Lily here, but it's okay. We can just, I mean, the clip will explain everything. She's going to tell you who she is. We really hope you enjoyed this clip, and we'll be back with you right after this. This one will last for a few minutes.
Sat down with Lily Tang Williams, a survivor of Communist China's Cultural Revolution and now a congressional candidate for New Hampshire's 2nd District.
Under Mao's Cultural Revolution, they can find something you wrote, something you said many years ago, and then demonize you as oppressor. You lose your job. You go to camps. You go to struggle sessions. Have you seen the struggle session in America today? It's called less whiteness training. Well, I was born in Chengdu, which is the capital city of Sichuan province in southwestern China next to Tibet. And my parents were illiterate workers. They worked for state factories 6 days a week. How primitive the living condition was, people cannot imagine today. And 8 families shared one bathroom. And the bathroom is a big hole on the ground. So it was very primitive. And my parents, because they were the poor workers, we got very little food coupons. People have no idea when you live in a socialist, communist country, everybody basically was equally poor unless your position is pretty high up in the Communist Party. I was 2 years old when Mao's Cultural Revolution started, like peak of his Cultural Revolution. And my memory started struggle sessions in the public square where people, so-called black classes, Mao separate people use classic Marxist theory, oppressor versus oppressed. Under oppressor, there are 5 black classes. Under oppressed, there are 5 red classes. I was red. I did not have to go to struggle sessions, but other people were black classes. They have to go to struggle sessions, be public and shame, to denounce their families, their ancestors. And some of them, I remember, looked so pale because they got inside the military truck and going to get the public executed. So it was very scary. My childhood memory was just like it was a chaos, scary.
Well, it's fascinating because you were actually one of the red classes, which means you were the, ostensibly the oppressed. You were the good guys,
oppressed,
for lack of
yes.
a better. The Chinese Communist Party has this narrative that says it lifted millions of people out of poverty.
Well, I know the differences. When Mao died, I was 12 years old, 1976. China's economy was about to complete collapse. 40 million peasants who supported Communist Party's communism starving to death. So 1978, when Deng Xiaoping came back to power to say we need to have economic reform, they basically led the peasants to grow food on their little land, and of course land owned by the state, but the Sichuan peasants, I heard, actually start to grow food and so say, hey, we don't want to practice anymore, but here's your land, let's divide it up, and you turn percentage up to the government as a form of taxes, and then you keep the rest. That just gives people incentive to work hard because they can keep a portion of that for themselves. They don't have to be starving to death. It's supposed to be cracked down because that's not legal. But he said, actually, let them do it. They say monitor it. Then later, basically, they did this reform. That's what's going to do it because it worked. We had more and more harvest. Instead of under Mao, people were starving to death. And central planning, then, of course, Deng Xiaoping did more reform later, allowed little bit of private industry and private business, private properties, and China boomed. And the people not just more than food, but they had their condos, they had their own company, factories. 600 million Chinese lifted out of poverty, not by the party, but by their own hard work and their human nature to pursue prosperity and the freedom. So I do not buy into parties' narratives. Chinese people are successful all over the world. If you just leave them alone, they prosper. It's human nature if you just get out of the way. So I don't buy their propaganda. It's all gives them the credit.
So that's a really important point to step in here because this is the argument that they'll present you, is that we need to be involved. The government needs to be involved here and redistribute this wealth, and we need to tax you into prosperity. Well, you find out there from that, once they left the people alone to farm and grow their food, and took a little of the for tax, they were able to prosper and live. But you'll hear the narrative that all of these people were lifted out of poverty. Our government tries to make that claim too, that they're creating jobs. It's not their job. It's not our government's job to create jobs. It never has been. It's their job to get out of the way and so that the economy can run on its own.
Well, when I was little, that the best students in all government schools get nominated by teachers to be young pioneer. We have a political, moral, character education. It's all about political stuff. And then I made the best grades, so I was so confident to say I would be the first one join Young Pioneer. Naturally, I'm a red child too. No, I did not. You know why? Because somebody reported to my teacher I was too confident. And my teacher called me into her office to say, we're not going to let you to join Young Pioneer because you are not humble enough. This is a collective society. Your individual expression of confidence is a flaw, it's a drawback. You need to comply, you need to act like everybody else. So I learned, okay, I'm gonna join Young Pioneer, I'm gonna keep my everything private, don't tell anybody, don't trust my friends, and I just go to school, make a good grades, and long live Chiang Mao. You got to do all that chanting, dancing in schools, and I proved to my teacher I was good. I joined Young Pioneer 1 year later. In middle school, I joined Regards, and high school, communist youth, is called a youth member. And in law school, in order to teach in law school after graduate from college, I had to become party member in order to get a teaching job in law school.
Did you believe in the ideology, or when did you start, or did you not?
Oh, I believe everything. They control all the press, all the media, all the TVs, radios. I mean, of course. And
I'm going to skip ahead here. We're thinking about releasing this with some other information as a clip by itself, but I want to move ahead to where she talks about what she's seeing in America now, what she's starting to see. Yeah, so here, this is the story of when she came to America. Maybe we can start there. She came to America with $100 in her pocket and went to university, to UT Austin. Let's see.
Primary in New Hampshire. So clearly you're someone that's made it along the way. One of the things that you've been vocal about is that you see some very disturbing trends that remind you of what you saw in China, what you experienced, and even the thought processes.
Well, first of all, it took me 20 years in America to get rid of my indoctrinated mind. I did not come here to run for office. I did not come here to get involved with politics. I just wanted to come here for freedom, have a better life. Just everybody leave me alone, right? So 20 years I was busy. But when I woke up, 2008, I noticed something. It's like there's something going on in America I really don't like. How come governments got really bigger, more intrusive, and also they're using some terms, like communist terms, And especially under, when also Obama become president, and his rhetoric is, we got to fundamentally transform America to what country? I came here for America, but they want to transform it. And I noticed socialist policies, and like today, everybody is talking about equity. How can you have equity which is equal outcome, which I heard in China before, without the government use force to redistribute wealth? Why is everybody from corporations to universities and our high schools and our federal agencies, even include our military, everybody is proudly uses this word equity or DEI as a victim of Communism Memorial Foundation speaker for 5 years. I noticed our educational system have not really taught our kids history and the horror of communism, evil of socialism, and our kids don't know. Maybe that's why they want equity and they want the socialist policy. They want the free college and free health care and free child care and everything free because they're entitled to. It's a human right. And our teachers even don't know, nice teachers even don't know about what Mao did to Chinese people. How many people died under communism in China? They have no idea. They know a lot more about Nazis and, but not much about China. And last 2 years, I just got even more and more terrified. I see this rise of authoritarianism. We have a politician want to be our tyrant. They want to shut you down. They want to force your business close in the name of pandemic. And then mandate the vaccine, mask, and if you don't comply, you can lose your job, career, your business is not essential, you get a fine if you want to cut people's hair, and our schools were shutting down, churches were shut down. I thought I come here for constitutional rights of every citizen. How come they're doing this? And then I saw top-down statues, changing names of buildings and schools, burning, looting. BLM founder said, we are trained Marxist. I say people chanting in Chicago last year, the real solution is a communist revolution. You see Antifa marching with all the Soviet Union flags and they carry Mao's poster, Karl Marx, big poster. I really feel like I'm reliving another cultural revolution. And the critical race theory demonized so many people in this country. By what? By being born white, by like something you cannot control, association. And America is supposed to be systemic racist country, like what the Chinese government will tell me, will tell their people. It's like, but actually it's going on all over the country right now. Teachers' unions want to teach critical race theory in all public school districts. Identity politics, 5 red classes under Mao and 5 red, and now it's a different oppressors versus oppressed. But to me, I have heard before, and the people might not know, I see the writings on the wall. We are using identity politics to divide citizens and get our citizens to fight each other instead of united with each other to solve our country's problems. And I say families don't talk to each other. During the shutdowns, they even report their neighbors for having parties in their homes because they violate the restrictions. So I was having PTSD. I will literally wake up in the middle of night. What is going on? How come this is like the cultural revolution all over again?
Well, so people will say, well, during the Cultural Revolution, tens of millions of people died, were killed, died of starvation, and so forth. That's not happening here. That's not the Cultural Revolution.
Not yet. That's why we got to hold on to our Second Amendment. And also, we need to exercise our free speech right now. We need not to be silenced and afraid to lose our jobs, careers, business, because if you don't push back, who is there? Who is there to defend our liberty, our free speech, and to protect our children? What they did during COVID, to me, is mind-boggling. Do we still have a free world? The tyrants like people to destroy America. You see the free world. Why are Western democratic countries taking Communist parties' tactics and the shutdown methods from their playbooks? But in our country, they're canceling people because they're not politically correct on social media. And you can say something, do something 20 years ago, they want to cancel you today. That's exactly what happened under Mao's Cultural Revolution. Yeah, they can find something you wrote, something you said many years ago, and then demonize you as oppressor, black class. You lose your job. You go to camps. You go to struggle sessions. Have you seen the struggle session in America today? It's called less whiteness training. I have a friend in New Hampshire just got fired because he's a white male in a school, even private school. He refused to go to training, supposed to say, examine himself. You know, I'm a white. Maybe I have a hidden bias. I'm a hidden racist. He said, no, I have nothing to apologize. I'm born this way. And everyone is born equal in our country, according to the Declaration of Independence. We should not judge people by the skin color and by the race. But that's what they want to do all day. There are too many of you. We need to have quotas for somebody else who is more oppressed, who have darker skin color. Is that right? Cancel individual merits and meritocracy. It's also what Mao did during his Cultural Revolution.
So basically, that is what you saw in communist China.
It's a very typical communist tactic to divide people, get them to fight each other. So that's how you do Cultural Revolution. Should we destroy all the American old traditions, old values, old institutions? Like a Supreme Court, they were making threats to Supreme Court justices. Separation of powers, rule of law is part of our American tradition. It's in our Constitution. So we should change that and replace with what? I don't think so. It's more dangerous. We have a constitutional republic. Our country is not democracy. Constitutional republic, that means you have a separation of powers, and you elect your representatives and the senators. President has his job as executive, and the Supreme Court, other courts have their job. Judicial independence is very important to protect people's natural rights. But now they don't respect that, and they will call out the people like us, we are threats to democracy. But who is the one who is attacking our fundamental democratic process? Right now, our American dream is under attack. Free speech is under attack. Our children are facing massive indoctrination in schools. Parents have to really protect their kids by exercise parental rights and control now to say what their are taught. During Mao's Cultural Revolution, I was not allowed to dress like a girl, look like a girl. Oh no, you can get into deep trouble in schools. Right now, you see, they're pushing down transgender stuff into our school kids. They're doing that in our school to teach our school kids, 8, 9 years old, to change sex forever. 13-year-old kid can make life-changing, gender-changing permanent surgery from boy to girl, girl to boy, without parental consent. And the insurance company have to pay for it. What's going on in our, how about parents? Is that still common sense? And what if those kids suffer later? We got to have some common sense. I remember there were lots of people at the beginning of funding of PRC, and they bought into communism, and they were so excited. They supported the Mao, they supported the party. Mao sold to peasants. We will take the land from the landowners and we'll give to you. Of course, peasants love to hear that, because they were incited to hate their landlords and to have this entitlement attitude. I should have some too. Why do you have so many? I have to work for you. At the beginning, some peasants said, well, my landlord's kind of nice to me. I don't want to, do this. No, they want to install hatred in your head. They want to you to feel very jealous of you rich landlords. That's a Marxist theory. So they all become, very active supporters. And guess what? When Mao took over China, he did a land reform. He did kill about 1 million to 2 million landowners in the country and seize their private land. But he did not give to peasants. He had a new idea. He changed his mind. We need to start people's communes. Land actually belongs to the people, but not you individual peasants. The land belongs to the people, means belong to the state. Now you see what happened. People's commune, Great Leap Forward, 40 million peasants starving to death. They could not even bake because you had to bake with your pass. You're supposed to live where your household registration told you to live. If you go to another village to bake, you can't get into trouble. You don't have the papers to travel. And you also see scientists, artists, and teachers, intellectuals all supported the communism for the ideal, what the communism, represents. Oh, equality, equity, and take what you need. We all are a big family, and the workers rule, all that. And guess what? So he invited the college students, intellectuals to criticize party policy, give feedback. How can we improve? How are we doing to govern New China? And they did. They were trustworthy. Get on blacklist. Go to labor camps. We can solve our problems if we just stop this division and stop this communist tactic, equity. I don't want another cultural revolution happening here. I don't want to live in a socialist country. Lockdowns, no freedom, subject to food rationing, and cannot even travel. Social credit system track them. And I see the writing on the wall. I feel it's my duty as a new American citizen to warn people, to say, oh, this is wrong. We're going down this path very fast. And there are lots of elected people into US Congress are socialists who push for socialist policies. And the people support them because they like the government take care of them. For me, I have lived in China. I have lived 2 years in Hong Kong. And I want the people to rely on ourselves, personal responsibility, rely on our nuclear families, extended families, and our local communities and private charities. Do not rely on government, because the government actually has a tendency to overgrow and to interfere with our daily lives. And when they promise you free stuff, remember, it's never free. It's paid by somebody else. And it's use their force to tax, to redistribute wealth. And now they're printing money out of thin air. That's why inflation is high, gas prices so high, because their policies are actually destroying our American dream, which is, to me, freedom and prosperity. So my last, words to people is that, let's be united, and let's be kind, be nice to each other. Let's disagree respectfully, and then we continue with our American way of life. But America is the exceptional country, and I hope America will stand up for freedom, still always as this shining city on the hill for freedom lovers all over the world.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. So, the hidden hand, right? All progress in capitalistic agriculture, like the United States, is a process of destruction. I wanted to also just like you guys think about the He Gets Us campaign and how they've been watering down Jesus, right? leading us down this path of a watered down Jesus, a weak Jesus that isn't the only way, the only truth, and the only path. So they've been trying to distort that message and bring us into an ecumenical message. These are other players that are out there.
Yeah, these are some of the guys that influenced Karl Marx. Justus von Liebig. These were the early environmentalists, the Malthusians. This is where the Club of Rome, this is where they get their pedigree from, calling for population reduction. Their idea is that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever anywhere on Earth to prove their theory that population is going to outstrip the Earth's ability to provide for
Again,
it.
it's any means necessary. So they don't have, the ends justify the means. So they'll just continue to make up stuff even if it's not true. That's why.
You want to read Brian Sussman's book, Climate Cult, to get all of the background on this part of the story.
These are some of the characters. Author of Silent Spring, heavily influenced by anti-American Marxists, unmistakably loathed humanity. Of course, we've got Lenin here.
That was the first green movement was run by Vladimir Lenin, and it killed millions.
There he is again. And we're back to this. Harris, her campaign. And this idea that if the world government cause is to triumph, people must be made to feel that their very own security, freedom, prosperity, and yes, their very survival depend on the creation in our time of a world rule of law. So again, think about the narrative that they have right now about either you're going to have a fascist or you're going to have a communist, right? But the truth is that they really are communists, but they don't want you to know that. Yeah. They don't want you to believe it.
There are no fascists running for office right now.
No, there's not.
Not yet.
And we wanted to just let you guys look at this cast of characters here. So, Brad, you want to set it up for the bust?
Cesar Chavez, yeah, when Barack Obama came into office, what was that, in 2008, he had the bust of Winston Churchill removed from the Oval Office and had it replaced with Cesar Chavez. Now, Cesar Chavez was interesting. He's an interesting character. Not quite as severe as, maybe Hugo Chavez. He was, but he hated capitalism, that's for sure. And he was all about government intervention and controlling his people through keeping them limited, not letting them being able to produce as enough to keep themselves.
And he was called out by the John Birch Society for being a Marxist.
Yeah. And so Obama comes in and he has Winston Churchill's bust replaced with Cesar Chavez. And then when the first thing that Joe Biden did when he came into office was same thing, had Chavez's bust, but they're telegraphing to you who they are
exactly
and what they stand for. And we're surrounded by them now too,
right.
North and South.
So yeah, Claudia Sheinbaum, who's going to come into office in October, she is very much in this same camp. Also with her father being involved in these communist movements. She's written multiple papers on climate change. She touts decolonization. She's a Marxist. And also we've got Justin Trudeau, which we know.
Yeah, now we have this.
We have a clip.
Chrystia Freeland, who is the, what is she? The Deputy Prime Minister of Canada.
That's right.
Listen to this clip, folks.
Chrystia Freeland had to say at the time. Let's listen to the full 2 minutes.
Our time of tranquility is over, and we are living in an age of change. We're living through what President Biden, on a visit to my country in March, called an inflection point. A time of transformation, he said, that comes once every 5 or 6 generations. Now, like it or not, you are graduating into that inflection point. And as some of the very best educated people on our planet, you have the rare and precious opportunity to shape it. So What is this inflection point? What is this upheaval which is going to the roots of humanity itself? There are many ways to describe this transformational moment, but I think they all come down to one fundamental question. Does capitalist democracy still work? That's the question being posed around kitchen tables in my country and this one, as parents wonder if our children can count on capitalist democracy's essential promise of a future more prosperous than our present. It is the question being posed in the muddy and bloodied trenches of Bakhmut as Ukraine's brave Democrats resist the invading forces of Putin's dictatorship. And it is the question being posed by our shrinking glaciers and our warming oceans, which are asking us, wordlessly but emphatically, if democratic societies can rise to the existential challenge of climate change.
So there.
Wow. How many false presuppositions can you throw out at one time?
That's a winner.
Yeah. So that really just kind of sums it up, doesn't it? That brings us full circle around it. That's the message. Not you should know from this presentation exactly what that message means. There's nothing true about it. It's false. It's forcing change through conflict, and
that's about it in a wrap. We're going to go into in another show about the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and the Club of Rome and what they're up to, and these different break-off nations where they're implementing the Agenda 2021 for the 21st century programs. But that will be for another show. This is quite a lot of information to get out tonight. So,
all right. So I want to finish up as we usually do here with an encouraging message. You may have heard it before, but I think it's really important to give it to you one more time. Loving the truth is about much more than tearing down bad arguments, which we're called to do, and we've tried to take that on here tonight. But we're commanded to build one another up by being constructive, encouraging discernment and growth in the understanding of truth, but always pointing others back to the foundational truth of Scripture and the gospel. That's where we find our peace. Encouraging one another, away from the vain philosophies of those who know no better. 2 Corinthians 10, Paul gives some really incredibly helpful advice to be careful and thoughtful to maintain a spirit of humility, recognizing our total dependence on God's grace and truth at all times. And so we need to be grounded in the wisdom of Scripture so that we can discern between what is true and what is simply vain philosophy. That is how we become wise. That's how we remain vigilant and aware of deceptive influences and spiritual threats that have us hemmed in on every side. Because the days are evil. And even the most well-meaning person can be manipulative and manipulated. So be very careful when you're out on the internet and with your devices, even if you're sure you're not being manipulated, even if you're convinced that you're in control of the content you're watching, you're still being fed information, videos, articles that will make you anxious, that will cause you to doubt. We live under a system now of surveillance capitalism. You're the product. It's entertainment rather than enlightenment. It's novelty rather than truth. And anybody who's really successful in this new system knows how to capitalize on our natural inclinations to be entertained. And really important today, our natural inclination to be reassured that our suspicions are valid and that our beliefs are correct, whether they are or not. We just want somebody to tell us. It's easy for us all to fall into rabbit holes that increase our anxiety because whether you know it or not, again, even if you're taking all the precautions, the internet will feed you content that will inflame your fears, stimulate the worst parts of our minds, pull us away from and out of the peace we have with Christ, and will make you very anxious, even when you're sure that you're the one in control of that content. People will disguise themselves as ministers for the good. They'll proclaim that they're fighting darkness, saving the world from tyranny and lies. That's because the demonic will almost always manifest as something the human heart finds appealing. 1 Corinthians 11. Don't give your attention to them. Your anxiety is their commodity. Don't give it to them. Whenever we experience confusion and fear because of something we see or experience in the world, the first thing we need to do is examine ourselves. James, the brother of Jesus, in chapter 1, encourages Christians just like you, when you see these things happening, when things seem to be out of control, and when you feel under pressure or anxious, to not think like the rest of the world. That when trials come, you already know what's going to happen. You know how this ends. To think of that trial as an opportunity to grow in righteousness, to grow in spiritual strength, and to focus on making a faithful response in that moment of confusion, anxiety, and fear. But James also warns Christians, just like you and me, not to doubt, or will be thrown around by the winds of change. And will fall into traps set for us by the enemy. But James also says, if you don't understand what's happening and you feel confused by what you're seeing and hearing, pray. Ask God, who gives generously, because our God is the God of the open hand, not the God of the clenched fist. So if you want answers and comfort, the place to begin and end is in His Word. True wisdom will always be consistent with God's Word. So ask God with a humble heart and trust in His providence and sovereignty. And God will give you far more than you expect or deserve. He'll give you peace. Let me tell you a true anecdote that might help you see a bit more clearly what's actually happening in the world right now. After the flood, God's command to Noah and his descendants was clear to be fruitful and multiply. But they were proud. The people of Babel chose to defy God and establish a centralized world order under a singular ruler. They built this massive city and tower complex as a monument to their greatness. And also that tower was to avoid God's wrath. It's Genesis 11. But something happened. Their desire to exalt themselves above God led to their downfall. Their great work was never completed because suddenly they couldn't work together anymore. They couldn't communicate. Their language had been confused, preventing them from completing this. It crippled their ability to cooperate in this sinful endeavor. And so the people were scattered across the earth as God had intended in the first place, divided into distant and diverse nations with different and diverse languages. And here we learn a fundamental truth about our world. This should bring you peace. I pray that it does bring you peace, because this is the truth. When mankind unites in defiance of God's will, their efforts will inevitably be corrupted by sin. As the psalmist declares, the Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. Psalm 33:10. And so the efforts to build a global order against the will of God are doomed to fail. But here's the best part. In Acts chapter 2, we learn another timeless and infinitely encouraging truth about our world and our God. 50 days after Jesus walked out of the tomb, victorious over sin and death, Jerusalem was filled with people who had traveled from every nation under heaven, those same nations where God had dispersed the people. People had come from all of those nations and those different languages and gathered in Jerusalem to hear the good news. Acts 2:8. It says, "And how is it that we hear, each of us in our own native language?" Unlike the self-exalting ambition of the Babylonites, these individuals sought to hear and proclaim the message of the gospel, the message of the living Christ. And so God blesses and empowers those people who cooperate to magnify the name of Jesus Christ in the world. And so in God's grace and kindness, he didn't vaporize the people at Babel for their sin. He confused their languages and dispersed them because they were going to play an important role in history. And the curse at Babel was miraculously reversed that day in Jerusalem. God enabled the apostles to speak in various languages so that everyone present could understand the gospel in their own tongue. Not only did the miracle of Pentecost facilitate the spread of the gospel, but it also symbolized the unity, the true unity that comes from submitting to God's will rather than defying it or doubting it. The ambition of the great and proud Babylonites to reach heaven under their own authority and power only led to a curse of confusion. But the miracle of Pentecost and the mission to proclaim the kingdom of heaven was met with God's grace of understanding and true unity. The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. At Pentecost, humble men sought to glorify Christ, and God smoothed the path for their mission. Not only that, all of the work the Romans had done to build their empire and their infrastructure and their roads, their language, the order of their society and culture, all worked to facilitate the rapid spread of Christianity across the known world. And we see this principle encountered throughout Scripture, where God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. So the point is this: human cooperation can lead to different outcomes depending on the purpose. When people act out of pride and self-exaltation, manipulation, their plans will ultimately be frustrated. They might run on for a long time, but sooner or later, God will cut them down. But when cooperation is aimed at magnifying the name of Christ, God will provide everything necessary for the mission to succeed. And mine and Summer's prayer tonight is that message would secure you in your faith, would give you encouragement to maybe not feel so anxious and worried and fearful or suspicious and cynical about what we see in the world, but to remember this core truth: God is sovereign, He hasn't forgotten, and everything you see happening is a part of His decree. And redemptive history is being played out. And we're a part of it. And I think that's pretty awesome. Summer, that's all we've got.
Amen to that.
All right, folks. You got any closing shots?
No closing shots.
All right, my friends, we'll see you again here very soon. We hope this show has been helpful for you. And we ask you, please spread it around and share it. And if you haven't, download the Armor of Truth mobile app. All right, it's completely free, and it always will be, and you'll get some extra exclusive content there. You get access to our articles, and you'll get a notification whenever and wherever we go live. And if you can support us, every donation of any amount makes a huge difference. You can follow the links under this video. You can donate using the Armor of Truth mobile app Give tab, or at our website, armoroftruth.net/donate. All right, my friends, we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Good night.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up, because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
God, and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights
Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.